Borders of blood and oil, the untold saga of Guyana and Venezuela. In the dense jungles and sprawling savannas of South America lies a land where history is carved by the machete, written in the sweat of its people, and drenched in the oil that fuels the world's engines. This is the story of Guyana and Venezuela, two nations locked in a century-old struggle over the Essequibo region, a battle where empires have risen, leaders have fallen, and the shadows of foreign powers loom large. The birth of a nation. The road to Guyana's independence was paved with blood, toil, and the relentless pursuit of freedom. A former British colony, Guyana's history is a patchwork of cultures, a product of centuries of colonization, slavery, and indentured servitude. The fertile lands of this Caribbean nation were once a prison for Africans and Indians, brought to its shores under the lash of slavery and the burden of indentured labor. Their sweat fed the sugarcane fields and built the foundations of a society that would one day rise against its colonial masters. As the 20th century dawned, the winds of change began to sweep across the globe. The British Empire, once a colossal titan, began to feel the strain of maintaining its dominions. Guyana, a small but strategically vital colony, was no exception. Amidst the cries for independence, a leader emerged. Forbes Burnham, a man whose name would become synonymous with the nation's struggle for identity and power. Born in 1923, Forbes Burnham was a lawyer by trade, but a revolutionary by nature. He was a man of sharp intellect and unyielding determination, with a vision to uplift the black population of Guyana, who had long been marginalized under British rule. In 1955, Burnham co-founded the People's National Congress, a party that would come to dominate Guyanese politics for decades. Burnham's rise to power was not without controversy. His political rival, Chedi Jagan, led the People's Progressive Party, which had garnered significant support from the Indo-Guyanese community. The two leaders represented the deep ethnic divide within the country, a division that the British were all too eager to exploit. As Guyana inched closer to independence, the geopolitical stakes grew higher. The Cold War was at its peak, and the United States, ever wary of communist influence in its backyard, took a keen interest in the small nation. The CIA, with its covert operations and shadowy tactics, saw an opportunity in the political strife between Burnham and Jagan. They feared Jagan's Marxist leanings and sought to undermine him at every turn. But Burnham, with his shrewd political maneuvers, managed to outwit both his domestic rivals and foreign adversaries. In 1966, Guyana finally shook off the chains of British rule and declared its independence. Burnham became the country's first prime minister and later its executive president. Under his leadership, Guyana embarked on a path of nationalization, with Burnham positioning himself as a champion of the black working class. He sought to elevate his people, giving them a voice in a nation where they had long been silenced. But his tenure was also marked by authoritarianism, electoral fraud, and economic decline, a legacy that would haunt Guyana for years to come. Across the border, Venezuela was undergoing its own tumultuous journey. From the 1930s onwards, the country's vast oil reserves had attracted the attention of global powers, making it both a prized asset and a hotbed of political instability. The discovery of oil transformed Venezuela from a sleepy agricultural nation into one of the wealthiest countries in Latin America. But this newfound wealth also brought corruption, inequality, and a string of dictatorships. In 1945, the country experienced a brief period of democracy with the rise of Romulo Betancourt, a leader committed to modernizing Venezuela and reducing its dependence on oil. However, the CIA's influence in the region grew as the Cold War intensified. The United States, determined to protect its oil interests, backed a series of coups and interventions that would leave Venezuela mired in political chaos for decades. By the late 20th century, Venezuela's oil wealth had become both a blessing and a curse. The country was rich in resources, but its people suffered under the weight of mismanagement, corruption, and foreign interference. The rise of Hugo Chávez in the late 1990s marked a new chapter in Venezuela's history. Chávez, with his fiery rhetoric and socialist policies, positioned himself as a thorn in the side of the United States. But his presidency also deepened the divisions within Venezuela, setting the stage for the crisis that would engulf the nation in the years to come. The shadow of the Essequibo. At the heart of the tension between Guyana and Venezuela lies the Essequibo region, a vast resource-rich area that both nations claim as their own. The origins of the dispute date back to the 19th century, when Venezuela, newly independent from Spain, laid claim to the region. The British, eager to expand their empire, dismissed these claims, and in 1899, an international tribunal ruled in favor of Britain, awarding the Essequibo to British Guyana. For over a century, the dispute simmered, occasionally flaring up, but never fully resolved. As global energy demands grew, the Essequibo's untapped reserves became increasingly valuable. Venezuela, now grappling with its own internal crises, began to assert its claims more aggressively. The CIA's presence in both countries further complicated the situation. In Venezuela, the agency's involvement in various coups and attempts to destabilize the government only deepened the mistrust between the two nations. In Guyana, the legacy of CIA interference during the Cold War left a lasting impact on the country's political landscape, with both nations wary of the invisible hand of foreign powers in their affairs. The border tensions between Guyana and Venezuela are not just about land. They are about history, power, and the future of two nations with a shared but troubled past. As oil continues to flow from the ground, so too do the ambitions of leaders, the machinations of foreign powers, and the dreams of the people who call this land home. President Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela, grappling with an economic crisis and international isolation, has revived Venezuela's claims to the Essequibo with renewed fervor. Meanwhile, President Irfan Ali of Guyana, buoyed by the promise of oil wealth and the support of international allies, stands resolute in defending his nation's sovereignty. The stakes are high, and the rhetoric on both sides grows more intense with each passing year. The story of Guyana and Venezuela is far from over. It is a tale written in the sands of time, where every chapter brings new challenges and new possibilities. In this land of shadows, the past is never truly past, and the future is always uncertain. The Essequibo region, with its riches and its ghosts, remains a prize that both nations covet, but only one can claim. And in the depths of the jungle, where the rivers run deep and the oil wells pump black gold, the story continues to unfold.